So recently, me and a friend of mine have decided that honor mode was a little bit too easy for us, so we decided to mod the game. I'll include the mods down in the description if you wish to check them out, but essentially we added a health multiplier, which comes in the extent of combat extender, as well as 5e spells to let enemies use more unique spells, but also us, so it makes an even playing field. And this is where I discovered that Shadowblade is a really cool build that I want to do. So today we're going to be looking into the Shadowblade build for Baldur's Gate 3. So first of all, let's look at what is a Shadowblade. It is a uncommon short sword that gives the wielder advantage against light or heavily obscure targets, but the special thing about this blade is that it deals 2d8 psychic damage instead of the usual 1d6. It is also a finesse weapon, which means you can use your dexterity for your attacks, or you can also dual wield it because it has the light trait. It is also dippable. The special thing about this thing is that we are going to make it do insane amounts of damage with the class choice and our elixir choice, so stay tuned and we'll get into that later. But first, let's see how to get a Shadowblade. If you are using 5e spells like we are, you can get it as soon as level 3. It's going to last for 10 turns or as long as you're concentrating. The moment your concentration is broken, the weapon is gone. If you're doing a vanilla playthrough, you can get Shadowblade through the ring that you gain as a reward for completing Arabella's parents' questline in Act 2. But none of that is permanent, so I am going to show you how to get a permanent Shadowblade, or well, we need 2 for dual wielding, so how to get 2 permanent Shadowblades. So to get a permanent Shadowblade, we are going to talk to withers. The reason why we are doing this is because we are going to abuse hirelings. So pick any hireling you like, of any race or any class you like, it doesn't matter. Here we picked the Githyanki. And essentially what you are going to do is you are going to give the Githyanki, or well, your hireling, the Shadowblade ring. Or if you're using 5e spells, you can also have it learn the spell by being a class that can learn the spell. By casting the spell, we are going to generate a Shadowblade in our inventory, and then we want to switch back to our main character, and we want to speak to withers again and dismiss this hireling. After we've done that, we want to rehire the same hireling, so pay attention to which one you picked. And after you rehire that hireling, they're going to have the Shadowblade in their inventory. This way, if you repeat that twice, we can have 2 permanent Shadowblades for us to dual wield. As you can see in the footage, we have a permanent Shadowblade that we can move around and equip on any character. So now that we know how to achieve a permanent Shadowblade, we're going to go into our class and race choice. For a race, I've picked Half-Orc because the extra damage dice applies not only to your main weapon attack, but also to anything that uses a dice when you critical hit. So I felt like Half-Orc was appropriate. We are doing this weird Ilithid pink fighter who is, their story is that they have been accepting the fact that they've become an Ilithid. Their psychic power is stronger than anyone else's. So for our class, we're going to take fighter, and then we're going to pick our 2 weapon fighting style. The reason why we're taking fighter is to get a proficiency in constitution saving throws, because we're going to need to concentrate a lot. Our stat spread is going to look the following. We want to mainly focus on constitution because, again, we're going to need to concentrate on spells, and when you are concentrating, you must make a constitution saving throw whenever you are taking damage to not lose concentration. Second, we want to pump up our dexterity as much as we can for both initiative and for some use cases where you might need to be the lockpicker of the party. The third stat that doesn't practically matter, we basically just want to have wisdom as high as possible. I prefer to have wisdom higher because our wisdom is going to help us not get tackled by spells like Hold Person. Our strength doesn't matter because we're going to be using a method to set our strength higher, so we can dump strength, and then the rest of the points you can put whatever you want. If you have the Hag Hair from Auntie Ethel, I would suggest putting a Constitution of 17 to bump it up to 18 as soon as you can, and this is how your stats should look if you have it. If you don't have the Hag Hair, your stats should look something like this. So for our second level, we are going to pick Fighter again, and we get Action Surge. For our third level, we actually have a choice between a few subclasses. My personal preference for this one would be the Battle Master. Champion is an option because it's decent to have an earlier crit, but Battle Master overall just feels way better and suits the build a little bit better. For the maneuvers, my personal favorites are Trip Attack, Menacing Attack. Precision Attack is okay if you need more to hit, but we're constantly going to have advantage with this build. Pushing Attack is nice, but I think I would have, if I had to pick 3, I would pick Trip Attack, I would pick Menacing Attack, I would pick Riposte, and of course the most broken one is Disarming Attack. You always want to get that one, because when you disarm an enemy, they are just going to not do anything in combat. For our level 4, we are going to choose the Savage Attacker feat. That feat is absolutely a must for this build. The Savage Attacker says whenever you are rolling a weapon attack, a melee weapon attack specifically, you will re-roll the damage dice and use the higher value, but that's false. It'll re-roll every modifier that is applied to the base damage of that melee weapon attack. So Savage Attacker is a must-have in this build. It'll skyrocket our damage to insane numbers constantly. For our level 5, there is not much to talk about. We're just going to go another level of Fighter to get that extra attack. At level 6, this is where we want to start to multi-class. We're going to take a first level in Rogue. For our abilities, just pick whatever you want and choose whatever you think is cool for your character. Here I picked Acrobatics and Sleight of Hand. The reason we are picking Rogue is for our Sneak Attack. Sneak Attack usually would do our weapon damage, which is usually for finesse weapons going to be the damage type usually is slashing. But as you can see now, as our Sneak Attack is doing psychic damage. That's because we have our Shadowblades equipped. Not only that, but as you will see in the footage, all of our superiority dice damage is also going to be psychic because we are wielding a Shadowblade. For our level 7, we're actually going to go into 2 levels of Rogue. This gives us a bonus action Hide, Dash, and Disengage, which is really good for this build. Gives us a lot of maneuverability. For our subclass, we are going to choose Thief for the additional bonus action for our offhand attack, as well second story work is okay. We are not going to pick Assassin because it just doesn't synergize enough with this build. For level 9, we are actually going to take our first level in Cleric. Now you might wonder why Cleric and why specifically this type of Cleric that I chose. We're going to explain that in a second. For cantrips, you can pick whatever you like. Here I picked a few of my own personal choices. Make sure you don't pick or don't use the cantrips that require concentration when you are concentrating on a spell. For domain, we are going to choose the Tempest domain. War domain would have been good, but we already have a offhand Shadowblade that we can use for our bonus action, so there is no need for War Priest charges. The reason I picked Tempest domain is so that we have an additional reaction to use, but as well as we can also use the Fog Cloud spell if we need to sometimes have fog to cover us. For deity, we can pick whatever we want, and for our prepared spells, we mainly care about Shield of Faith. The rest is up to you. You might want to pick Healing Word in case your party needs a secondary healer or secondary bump at some times, but Shield of Faith is where it's at. This is going to be our main concentration spell unless we're using Hunter's Mark. For our level 10, we are going to pick another level in Rogue. We are going to use an ability score improvement to raise our Constitution to 20 if we have the Hag here, or 18 if we don't. The reason why I'm speccing Constitution so high is because of our proficiency, and the way to get advantage on Constitution saving throws to break our concentration is going to be extremely difficult. For our level 11, we are going to take our last level in Rogue, because we have Uncanny Dodge, which says whenever you are taking damage from an attack, you will take only half damage, which is going to make us extremely tanky. And finally, for our last level, we're going to take our last level in Fighter, which is going to give us a feat. There are a couple of choices here. First of all, if you haven't gotten the hack here, I would consider maxing out our Constitution to 20. Another feat that we can also take is Alert. Alert is just really good, allowing you to go first. Our second option is also Dual Wielder, but we don't really need it because both our weapons are light. The +1 AC bonus is not really going to make any difference. My personal choice would have been Heavy Armor Master, because you're going to reduce all damage taken by 3 from attacks. It's going to make you extremely tanky. Another option you can also go for is Martial Adept and pick Menacing Attack, or whichever one of the 4 that I mentioned before you haven't picked. It'll also give you an additional superiority dice. This is just really synergistic for our build. Sentinel is also a choice, but Sentinel is bugged, so don't use Sentinel. And then for our last feat, we also have Tough. If you're really missing out a chunk of HP, you can just pick Tough and you will be extremely tanky. So let's talk about gear. For our weapons, we're obviously going to use our permanent Shadowblades that we discussed before. And then we'll go over what else we're going to need, or what else you might choose, depending on what preferred playstyle you want. For our elixir, we're either going to be using Elixir of Hill Giant Strength, or if you have access, then the Cloud Giant Strength. Both of these are extremely good because they're going to give us a +5 to our attacks and damage rolls. Instead of using our Dexterity, we're going to be using our Strength. Let's talk about cloaks first, because there's a few interactions that we like. Cloak of Displacement is obviously really good, but that is later in Act 3. Cloak of Protection is very early in Act 2, and so is Cloak of the Cunning Broom. Personally, I like Cloak of Protection, but I think later you want Cloak of Displacement. That's just really strong. Cloak of the Cunning Broom is the one I use the most, because when you slap this on, and you slap on the Ever Sight Ring, and you, as a rogue, disengage as a bonus action, you create a fog. You can see it says fog, and you are immune to this fog. And if you were to do this next to an enemy, if you were to do this next to an enemy, we'd actually have advantage on the attack. Let's turn this on, and you can see we have advantage because the enemy is blinded, and that gives us a higher hit chance. So for now, I would use Cloak of the Cunning Broom plus the Eversight Ring. That is one of the combos. The best in slot ring, in my opinion, is the Strange Conduit ring. The fact that you do 1 to 4 psychic damage, which later gets doubled, is just so good. About the other rings, you can also use Caustic Band. I don't know why my one is green. Might be because this is an older save. The ring that you use to create your Shadowblades, if you're not using the 5e spells method I mentioned. Killer Sweetheart, when you kill a creature, your next attack roll will be a critical hit. Is also really good. This is only once per long rest, and you can use this in combination with the Surgeon Subjugation Amulet, which means when you score a crit on a humanoid, you can paralyze them, which will then result in permanent crits on that target for 2 turns. And later you can use Ring of Regeneration. Any of these are good. My personal preference is Strange Conduit plus Eversight Ring. Those are just my personal preference. And then I would probably be using Cloak of Displacement or the Cunning Broom. There's a strange interaction with Cunning Broom, which I'll show later when we get to actually the gameplay of the video. For boots, I really like Boots of Striding. When you are concentrating on a spell, you cannot be knocked prone. If you are knocked prone, your concentration immediately ends. So these boots are insane for us. These boots are obtained by Mintara, either when you recruit her or when you kill her. The other ones are also disintegrating Nightwalkers. It's never bad to have an additional bonus action, Misty Step. For our armors, obviously the best in slot armor in Act 1 is the Adamantine Splint Armor. And then from Act 2, you get the Justiciar Half-Plate. We really like that one because it gives us advantage on concentration checks. And then if you choose to kill the Night Song, you get the Dark Justiciar Half-Plate, which I would highly recommend. This armor is super good for us. It has an AC of 17, advantage on concentration checks, Constitution saving throw checks, which are indeed also our concentration checks. And while we have Shield of Faith active, which is one we're going to have quite often, we reduce all incoming damage by 2, and then we also reflect necrotic damage back to the attacker. We also have advantage on stealth checks. That's the one I really like. One thing you can do is you can use the Shade Clinger Armor bug. Right now, if you look for a place that is obscured, for example here, this place is obscured, like under this tree. If you equip this armor, you will see that we are going to get a buff. See, it's called Clinging Shadows. If you hide, and then unhide, and then if you unequip the armor, you can equip anything else, and these are also the other two armors that I would recommend. Probably the Armor of Persistence is the strongest one, so I would roll with that one. You can see we still have the Clinging with Shadows, so we still have advantage on all of our saving throws, which means this will also give us advantage on our concentration checks. Careful, you have to do this every time you long rest. It gets a bit tedious, but it is also bug abusing, so choice is yours if you want to do that. But that's definitely the strongest option that we have. The Armor of Persistence obviously gives us Blade Ward, which is going to make us extremely tanky. Especially if we take Heavy Armor Master, we're going to reduce all damage by 5. Plus, we're going to also have resistance to it. The other option is Armor of Persistence, which will also add our Dexterity modifier, but that one is just not that good. So, in my opinion, you either go Dark Justiciar armor, or you go with the Shade Clinger and Armor of Persistence bug. If you want to use Shade Clinger, you can also use the Adamantine Split armor, because it's better than the Dark Justiciar Half-Plate. For our helmets, we have an option of 3. In my opinion, the best helmet early game is the Haste helmet. This build actually gets a use out of the Grimskull helmet, because of all 3 things are extremely beneficial to us. We cannot get critted, which means we will negate the crit damage. We also get resistance to fire damage, which is extremely common in Baldur's Gate 3. And we get a free use of Hunter's Mark, which is going to give us additional damage. Hunter's Mark is also going to do psychic damage because it does weapon damage. And it's also going to take our concentration for us. So another cool option is, I like the Bone Spike helmet. If you look here, we don't really get the use out of this part of the helmet. That's not important to us. The intimidation is nice, but this is where it's at. We have this menacing attack. We learned the menacing attack, but one important thing is, this is once per turn, so it does not use up our superiority dice at all. We can just do this once per turn for one attack for free, which is really strong, because enemies that are feared are going to stay in place and not move away from you. So you can just slam them harder. And if you are using the Cloak of the Cunning Broom, you can just make them not see, and they'll just have to target you because you're the closest one. So that's why I really like Menacing Attack. One also important thing to note, if you're using Menacing Attack, it is forcing the enemy to make a Wisdom saving throw to get frightened, which they will have disadvantage on, because we'll get to that later. For our amulet slots, we have a couple of choices. Broodmother's Revenge is insane early game. Amulet of Misty Step is just really good, another Misty Step. Periapt of Wound Closure, if you get it in Act 1, if you really need to be a tank, you can use this. Surgeon Subjugation, as I mentioned earlier. And then later you have Amulet of Greater Health. This is really good because it gives us advantage on Constitution saving throw checks. If you want to use the Armor of Persistence and this amulet, you can. I would then dump Constitution and put it in probably Dexterity for the higher initiative. And then you can also use the Bloodlust Elixir because you're not going to need the high strength anymore. Amulet of Face Semblance is also really good because you'll have advantage on all your mental saves. I'll explain why that is really good later. Personally, I used Broodmother's Revenge. And for those who caught it here, if we enter combat, if you hover over the raspberry, you can see it just has a single use. It will not use up your action or bonus action. You can see here we used up our bonus action. Here we're going to use our action. If we move a little bit, we can consume a raspberry. We'll regain some hit points. And we'll also dip our weapons. You can see now it's dealing an additional 1d6 poison damage. And it's going to last for a total of 3 turns. It also dips both weapons. So you can dip your weapon for free with raspberries. You can get raspberries in Act 1. I farmed a lot of them in the scratch area. Every long rest you should be getting around 40 or so if you find all of the bushes. So that's why we really like that amulet for early game. For late game, I would probably go with the Misty Step amulet. It's just better. Because in Act 2, enemies will mostly resist poison damage and you will not have access to raspberries. You can also ask your druid or whoever, ranger, or have a hireling give you good berries and use that as a bonus action instead. So yeah. For our ranged weapons, we have a selection. Deathshot Bow is really good for Act 3, but you're not really playing a crit build, so this is probably just better off on a crit character. Hellrider Longbow, again, really good because +3 to initiative rolls is really good. It's like half of an alert feat. Same goes for Bow of Awareness, +1 to initiative rolls, really good. But the one I like to use the most is the Hunting Shortbow. Not because it only has Hunter's Mark, which is another spell that we can concentrate on and do damage, as we have with the helmet. But also this, you will have advantage against monstrosity type enemies. There are a few monstrosities, but it's not only for this weapon, it also counts for your Shadowblades. So I really, really like using that one. Okay. And last, let's talk about our glove slot. There's a lot of gloves in this game which benefit our build. You can use Gloves of Missile Snaring in Act 1, but I prefer using the Growling Underdog. When you're surrounded, you will have advantage on your attacks. The Gloves of the Automaton are here, and I'll show why later. Dark Justiciar Gauntlets are decent. Brain Drain Gloves, when you inflict psychic damage, they will also gain Mental Fatigue, which will give them a penalty to Wisdom, Intelligence, and Charisma saves. If they reach 5 stacks, they'll also take some psychic damage. It's really good. It also helps your casters get your things off, but it also helps you use your Menacing attack to fear the enemy, because that is a Wisdom save. You can use Helldusk Gloves, those are really good. For Act 3, you have the Cerebral Citadel. Whenever you frighten or charm an enemy, you will get a bonus to attack rolls, which is really good. Stalker Gloves to give your sneak attack extra force damage. Crater Flash Gloves, which will allow you, when you score a crit, to deal, this is currently bugged, when you're getting double damage dice, so 2d6 force, and because you're an orc, you're gonna get 3d6. Really good damage. Helldusk Gloves, but those are probably just better given off to a caster because of the +1 to DC. And then, of course, you can use Gauntlets of Frost Giant Strength if you wish to not use the elixir. Then you can pump up your Constitution and Dex, and then just use a Bloodlust elixir. Personally, I think Legacy of the Masters is extremely strong. It's going to give us +2 to attack and damage rolls, which is going to be doubled again, which I'll show you why now. So, why this build is extremely strong, and this is an item you want to keep in a bag because sometimes it stops working if it's in your inventory, but in Act 2 you can actually get a Resonance Stone. If you've been paying attention, you can notice that also over here on our character we have this effect, which is called Steeped in Bliss. This is the effect that this stone has. It's a pretty, like, decently sized range. But what this effect does, if you read it here, seized by great joy, affected entities more energized and also more mentally compliant. All entities within this range that have the Steeped in Bliss will have advantage on physical checks. So on strength, dexterity, and constitution. But also, they will have disadvantage on mental saving throws. But the best part is they are also vulnerable to psychic damage. This is how we're gonna get our damage to go crazy. One important note, this will not affect constructs and undead. So the Steel Watchers are still your biggest enemy. So why is that good? Because when we have Gloves of the Automaton and we look at Circuit Interference, we can be considered a construct and we'll have advantage on our attack rolls. So we can use a bonus action once every short rest, which we have 2 of, so we can immediately do another bonus action if we wish. We'll have advantage on attack rolls, resistance to lightning damage, but you're also considered a construct, so you will not have weakness to psychic damage and disadvantage on mental saving throws. It's a really cool and good interaction. But again, personally, Legacy of the Masters is the ones I like to use the most. Until then, just use whatever you like, whatever your party needs. And for our Ilithid Powers, the really only one that we need is the Luck of the Far Realms. The rest is not needed. So now that we covered how our build works and our gear, we can actually start at combat and see how it's going to play in combat.
To fight.
Time to press ahead. I must heal. Too much to bear. Out of sight, out of mind. Light on my feet. My wounds are too much to bear. Can't slow down. That's a friendly looking shadow.
If you've enjoyed this build, please let me know down in the comments. Let me know which build you want me to cover next. Perhaps you have a build idea that has never been done before, or you would like a certain aspect of the game that you would like to use. Let me know down in the comments and I'll try to get my best to try and make this build fun and optimized. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.